I'm the biggest fan of the Second Amendment. Many of you are. I'm a big fan of the NRA, but I had lunch with them, with Wayne and Chris and David on Sunday, and said, it's time. We got to stop this nonsense. It's time. So we've made suggestions to many of you, and I think you're going to put a lot of those suggestions in. Plus, you're going to have your own ideas. Certain ideas sound good, but they're not good. You know, you can harden the site to a level that nobody can get in. The problem is if the shooter's inside and if he gets in the door and closes the door, we can't get people in. It's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars all over the country, and we'll have nice hard sites. The door closes, and now we can't get in. Have to send a tractor through the walls. So we have to be careful of that. And we have to create a culture that cherishes life and human dignity. So we're going to all sit around. We're going to come up with some ideas. Hopefully we can put those ideas in a very bipartisan bill. It would be so beautiful to have one bill that everybody could support, as opposed to, 15 bills. Everybody's got their own bill. But if we could have one terrific bill that everybody, started by the people around this table, special people. These are the people that seem to be just most interested, very interested in this problem, and it's a big problem. So with that, I think I'd like to start. Maybe I'll ask John, you can start off, and then we'll go back and forth. We'll leave the media for a little while, and they can hear some thought. But it's something that can be done. There's no reason for this. But again, I really believe that those people, it's idealistic, it's wonderful, it's a beautiful thing. But if you think that somebody's going to be able to walk into a school, if they feel that they're not going to have bullets coming at them from the other direction, you're never going to solve the problem. I feel that. I feel that. But I'm certainly open to suggestions. So, John, why don't you start? You've put in your fixed nicks, and let's see how it is, and go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for getting us together and for expressing your sincere concern about this and trying to get us to a solution. I agree with you that leaving this town and going home empty-handed is not acceptable. The public demands that we act. We know how hard it is to get people together on a bipartisan basis, but believe it or not, at least in one case, Senator Murphy and I, and we have 46 co-sponsors to the Fix NICS bill in the Senate. The House has passed its version of it, and I believe this is a good place for us to start. As you know, Sutherland Springs, we lost 26 people when a guy who, while in the Air Force, was a convicted felon. He was convicted of domestic violence, and he was less than honorably discharged from the military, none of which was uploaded into the background check system maintained by the FBI. And that's only as good as the data that's put into it. So Senator Murphy and I and 46 Senate colleagues on a bipartisan basis have what we think is a start. It's not the end-all, be-all. There's other things that people want to add to it. You've talked about the bump stock issue that Senator Feinstein, I know, cares passionately about.
And I'm going to write that out, because we can do that with an executive order. I'm going to write the bump stock, essentially write it out. So you won't have to worry about bump stock. Shortly, that'll be gone. We can focus on other things. Frankly, I don't even know if it would be good in this bill. It's nicer to have a separate piece of paper where it's gone, and we'll have that done pretty quickly. They're working on it right now, the lawyers. Go ahead.
But we need to get started on things that only we can do, which would be this background check system. People have other ideas. They ought to offer those ideas. I'm not sure all of them will pass, but in the past we've acquiesced to failure and have not done things that we know were within our power to accomplish, like the Fix NICS bill. So I would just like to recommend to you and to colleagues here that we get that done and we build on it. We don't stop there. We build on it, and because none of us want to look these families in the face in the wake of another mass shooting and say we failed to do everything within our power to stop it.
And John, Fix NICS has some really good things in it, but it would be nice if we could add everything onto it. And maybe you change the title, all right? The U.S. background check bill or whatever. But your bill is really good and really important, having to do with a certain aspect. But maybe we could make it much more comprehensive and have one bill instead of 15 different bills that nobody knows what's happening.
If we can get 60 votes for it, Mr.
I
President,
think
I'm all
you
for
can.
it.
Honestly, I think, look, I really believe this is one of the things where you can actually get the 60 votes and maybe easily. Diane, do you have something?
Well, I do, Mr. President. You probably know this, but I became mayor of San Francisco as a product of assassination. I've been the victim of terrorist groups. The department gave me a weapon. They taught me how to shoot it, and we proceeded through the 1970s that way. What I've watched and seen is the development of weapons that I never thought would leave the battlefield, that are out on our streets. And the latest and newest, Mr. Chairman, is the AR-15. It's got a lot of assets to it, and it's misused, and it tears apart a human body with the velocity. And I've watched the school shootings in particular, which you pointed out. And I thought Sandy Hook, and I'm delighted that Senator Murphy is here today. We thought Sandy Hook would be the end, and he and I introduced another assault weapons bill after the first one. We didn't succeed with it, but the killings have gone on, the number of incidents have gone up, and I put my case in writing, which I will give you, if I may, in letter form.
Good, thank you.
And secondly, the assault weapons legislation, this is the number of incidents before and of incidents and of deaths.
Right.
This is when the 10-year assault weapon ban was in, how incidents and deaths dropped. When it ended, you see it going up.
Okay.
So Senator Murphy
Take a look at it.
and 26 of us have co-sponsored a new bill. I would be most honored if you would take a look at it.
I will.
And we will get it to you and let us know what you think of it.
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chris, go ahead.
Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, thank you very much. Thank you for taking this seriously. Our hearts go out to Parkland. We know, having gone through this in Sandy Hook, that community will never, ever be the same. And I want to bring us back to this issue of background checks, if I could, because I think there's real opportunity.
I agree.
There is no other issue out there in the American public today like background checks. 97% of Americans want universal background checks. In states that have universal background checks, there are 35% less gun murders than in states that don't have them, and yet we can't get it done. There's nothing else like that, where it works, people want it, and we can't do it.
But you have a different president now.
Well, listen,
I mean, you went through a lot of presidents and you didn't get it done. You have a different president, and I think maybe you have a different attitude too. I think people want to get it done.
Well, listen,
Go ahead.
in the end, Mr. President, the reason that nothing has gotten done here is because the gun lobby has had a veto power over any legislation that comes before Congress. I wish that wasn't the case, but that is. And if all we end up doing is the stuff that the gun industry supports, then this just isn't worth it. We are not going to make a difference. And so I'm glad that you sat down with the NRA, but we will get 60 votes on a bill that looks like the Manchin-Toomey compromise on background checks. Mr. President, if you support it, if you come to Congress, if you come to Republicans and say we are going to do a Manchin-Toomey-like bill to get comprehensive background checks, it will pass. But if this meeting ends up with just sort of vague notions of future compromise, then nothing will happen.
We don't
And
want
so,
that.
So I think we have a unique opportunity to get comprehensive background checks, make sure that nobody buys a gun in this country that's a criminal, that's seriously mentally ill, that's on the terrorist watch list. But Mr. President, it's going to have to be you that brings the Republicans to the table on this, because right now the gun lobby would stop it in its tracks.
I like that responsibility, Chris. I really do. I think it's time. It's time that a president stepped up, and we haven't had them. And I'm talking Democrat and Republican presidents. They have not stepped up.
You've spoken about it, Mr. President, gun violence restraining orders. They're called. California actually has a version of this. And I think you, in your meeting with governors earlier this week, individually and as a group, we spoke about states taking steps. But the focus is to literally give families and give local law enforcement additional tools if an individual is reported to be a potential danger to themselves or others. Allow due process so that no one's rights are trampled, but the ability to go to court obtain an order, and then collect not only the firearms, but any weapons in the possession
Or
of that
might
individual.
take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system, because a lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court, to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. He had a lot of firearms, they saw everything. To go to court would have taken a long time, so you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
We think about the tragedy in Sandy Hook and
That's right.
Adam Lanza's mother, who spoke to law enforcement, spoke to local officials. She was concerned over and over again. I know our colleague from Connecticut lived this and saw it, but to literally give families and tools, law enforcement, as my state has done, as other states have done, to be able to take action to remove those weapons for either a set period of time or longer, to make sure that person can't be a threat.
I like that. Marco?
And just to add, obviously that's a state law provision, and I know there's some people working on what we can do at the federal level to incentivize states to do this, but states are allowed to do it right now, and hopefully Florida will do that here shortly. And it brings home this point. I think the Vice President alluded to it, and Congressman Rutherford just touched on it as well. There are people here that tried to do something. They called. They called the FBI. They called the sheriff's office. But legally, they had no recourse to sort of get ahead of this and stop it in terms of taking away his guns and placing him in a facility or some other measure with a court order to prevent him from being able to do this. And even if law enforcement had gone to see him, they would have been limited ultimately in their options as well. So this is an idea states can do, and I think there may be something we can do to incentivize it. I know we've been talking to your office and Senator Blumenthal and others, but ultimately states can do that now, the way multiple states have already done, and hopefully Florida will do.
Mr. President, in the 21st Century Cures Bill, Senator Murphy and I worked on, part of it involved the Mental Health and Safe Communities Act. We provided additional grants to jurisdictions that use assisted outpatient treatment. So it's sort of a variation on what the Vice President talked about. Adam Lanza's mother, if he wasn't compliant with his medications, wouldn't follow doctor's orders, and she needed some help, could go to court, a civil court, and get a court order that forced him to take his medication and follow his doctor's orders. Many people with mental illness can be, if they take their medication, if they're compliant, can function productively in society. So there are a variety of tools, and that's one that's already in law in addition to what the states are doing.
So let me just ask this, Chris and John, are you better off having a one-off bill, or can you merge it into Joe and Pat's bill? Because I like that much better, having a comprehensive bill. Some people don't like the word comprehensive when they talk. I like the word comprehensive. You know, they say, oh, that's a bad word because it represents things. I mean, to me, I like the word comprehensive. I'd rather have a comprehensive bill. Can you merge yours into this bill, or would you rather have a separate mix bill?
Mr. President, the most important thing you said at the outset is that we act.
You have to act.
And we don't go home
Yeah.
empty-handed. So
But
whatever
you know
we
what?
can
It'd
do
be
to
nice
work
to act.
together to act.
Yeah, but it would really be nice to create something that's beautiful, that works.
I think
And you know the biggest thing, Chris, the biggest surprise to me, because I've only been doing this for 2 years, right? 3 years now. Time flies. But I've been here for a little more than a year. What surprises me more than anything else is that nothing's been done for all these years. Because I really see a lot of common ground, whether it's Democrat, Republican. I'm so surprised. I'm sitting here and I'm saying, you know, there's a lot of commonality here. There's a lot of people that are agreeing with pretty much everything you guys are writing and that you guys are writing. I don't understand why this hasn't happened. For the last 20 years, nothing's happened. So we're going to get it done.
I think we can add anything to fix NICS that has 60 votes. And I think our argument is that background checks can be added to this if it has your support. And Mr. President, I would just add, I hope we follow the data here, because the data is going to tell you, we've talked a lot about safe schools, a lot about mental illness. The data tells you that America has a gun violence rate that is 20 times that of every other industrialized country in the world, but we don't have a higher mental illness rate. Our schools aren't less safe. We don't spend less money on law enforcement. What's different is that we have the loosest, most lax gun laws in the nation. So I'm all for doing everything, but we should fix the mental illness system because it's broken, period, stop. Not because we think that it's going to solve the gun violence epidemic.
You have to do it, fellas.
The data tells us that the one thing that is different about the United States is our unbelievably loose gun laws, and I hope we follow it.
If you don't have the background checks, you don't have the data.
That's right. No, that's right.
That's why I think they work together. I like it together better. But Joe, You have to fix mental illness. If somebody's mentally ill, right now they can go out and they can buy, you can't take it away. It's ridiculous. You got to fix it. And you're going to fix it. I'm sure you're going to fix it. And I like a merger because I think the merger works out better. Chuck, were you going to say one thing?
Well, you're showing leadership through this meeting, and following on what Marcia said about the incivility of our society and the culture of our society, the thought came to my mind that maybe you could show leadership about all the violence we have out of Hollywood and all these videos. If you watch Fox News probably, like I do, and every night you see all these films about everybody being blown up. Well, just think of the impact that makes on young people, and get them in here and preach to them like you're preaching to us.
Yeah, but actually Fox News does a very good job relative respect. But you're right.
It's
You're
just
right. No,
one
it's
channel.
It's very violent. But the movies are violent, and the videos are violent, beyond anything anybody's ever seen before. So
You had governors telling you this week the same thing, that the culture of our society's got to change if you're going to stop this.
I agree with that. I agree. Elizabeth?
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President. I've been wearing a bracelet like this for more than 5 years. I was with Steve, we were elected at the same time, and I was sitting with new member training when I got calls and texts about a school shooting of what turned out to be 20 6- and 7-year-olds and 6 educators in Newtown. So I haven't had a day I don't think about that Chris and I don't think about it. That's been our nightmare for the people we represent. It's now Ted's nightmare, and it's now your nightmare.
So why didn't they do something about it when that happened? When you look at Columbine, you look at so many of these horrible events, why didn't they do something about it? Why didn't this group of people plus others, and some have gone and some are going to be here?
Well, I think people tried, but I think your point is this. We're at a tipping point. We're at a tipping point, and why we are, I don't know, but I think it's the students.
You know why we are?
I think it's the students.
Elizabeth, you know why we are? Because a week will go by, another week, another week, another week, and all of a sudden, people are going to be onto other things. We can't let that happen.
We have the power to change that.
But that's
And-
that's what's happened.
So I think there are 2 things that we can do right now. I think, the Mansion to Me, which has a companion in the House, that's King Thompson, has 200 bipartisan co-sponsors, 200. You only need 218 to pass. That is ready to
I think
go.
Congress is going to be fine. I really do. If we can come up with something that's very strong, very heavy with mental illness, very heavy in the background checks are so important. People are afraid to do background checks because you're afraid of somebody. And you know what? You're going to be more popular if you do. If you have a strong, good, I don't care who's endorsing you or not endorsing, you're going to be more popular if that's what you're into. I'm not into popularity. I'm into getting something done that's good. I don't want to just get it done. We got to get something good that's done. Let's do it properly.